This is the September 1st meeting of Borough Council to discuss the preliminary budget. And we'll begin with a pledge of allegiance with Mr. Stefano. Thank you. Next, we'll go to item number 3, comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. Okay. There aren't apparently any comments by residents in attendance. Mr. Flynn, however, does have a few comments.
Good evening, everyone. The Westchester Borough received an early intervention program report in March of 2018. If we would have paid attention to the Pell report, the Pennsylvania Economy League, I don't think we'd be sitting here trying to figure out how to work on a deficit. I'm going to read 2 statements from the Pell, and it's really self-explanatory. I used to read them before every finance meeting, but after a while, people didn't pay attention to what I was trying to explain to them. But now we sit looking at 2022. Now, this is prior to COVID. So the Pell people knew what they were doing in 2017 and 2018. Chapter 4, Pell's financial projections for the period of 2018 through 2022 indicates the borough's general fund will not be able to keep pace with the growing fund expenditures. This is despite the fact that the borough is expected to transfer considerable amounts of money from different funds. The second statement that they made, which is pretty much on the same line, on Chapter 9, clearly states the Borough of Westchester faces substantial challenges ahead as projections indicate, and its general fund, that's our checkbook, expenditures will outpace the general fund revenues, resulting in an annual deficit. These deficits will likely be even higher absent the significant amount of annual transfers from wastewater and from storm protection. So this is not something new. They must have had a crystal ball looking at our finances in depth. We did not heed their warning. And here we sit looking at the 2022 budget where our revenues are not keeping up with our expenses. So with that being said, I turn it back to Mr. Braceland.
Thank you. Any members of council have any questions or comments? Any members of the audience have any questions or comments relative to Mr. Flynn's comments? Oh, Mr. Allen.
There we go. I'm good. When the Pell report talks about, I just want to clarify something. When you're talking about the general fund, does that exclude our enterprise funds?
What they were making mention to in the general fund is the enterprise funds being wastewater and parking. And they said that what we were doing is taking significant withdrawals from those in order to balance our budget, which would have been our general fund. And they said we should stop doing that or should come up with other ideas on funding the general fund. So that's on Chapter 4, if you have the book in Chapter 9.
I've read it.
Yes.
So I know the sewer fund money, we're very limited with what we can do. So it doesn't make sense to run the sewer fund at a large surplus because we can't move that money to pay for like a borough building or something like that. Is that true for the parking fund? That money's a little more free to use when we transfer that over, right?
I'll let Mr. Perone and Ms. Leonti explain that to you.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that's obviously really smart and what we should be doing. So I'm trying to understand what you were saying. Are you trying to say that we should not run our parking at a surplus, that we should just break even on parking so we don't transfer that into the general fund?
No, what the Pell people were saying was that our general fund, it doesn't have enough revenue coming into it through other means other than the parking fund where we can take the money out of the parking fund. Further in the book, which is pretty thick, if you read through it, for the people that are in the audience, they actually give ideas on what we should do as far as taxes and services and what they also explained along with this with their statements. They even break down the revenue projection assumptions. If we had no tax increase on chapter 4, it goes all the way to 3.7% growth in state aid. You know, they break it down really, really well. The fact of the matter is, we don't have enough revenue coming in other than the tax base that we have and the parking fund. There are two main things that we run the borough on, and they're not sufficient enough to do it this particular time.
And I mean, I think I agree with you that it makes sense to rely on the parking fund less than we have in the past. I think we've seen eye to eye on that. I just get a little bit curious about the argument that the general fund itself isn't bringing in enough when we know we can rely on some level of parking.
Okay, I'll try to spin it a different way for you. What they were saying is that we should, the parking fund should be our last avenue, but it's very accessible to us to use it for wherever we want to use it for. What they're basically telling us is that the license and permits, local taxes, earned income taxes, the real estate taxes aren't high enough to carry the revenue coming in, and the parking funds are equal to the general fund debt. So what they're basically saying is, and you'll see tonight with the presentation from the finance department, Pell also warned about the growing size of what it takes to have a good police department. A good police department is extremely expensive, and you know, they broke down all the different aspects of that cost. So the police department is not a revenue generating stream. It's a cost stream to the borough, but the only really money coming in would be the property tax and the use of the parking fund. So.
And since, I don't mean to be disrespectful looking at my computer, I took a lot of notes on the Pell report, and I think they're on my MacBook, unfortunately, but I remember reading a lot of the recommendations, and to me, it seemed like we had done at least a fair amount of them, because since then, the earned income tax has gone up, we increased property taxes, we've increased the sewer rate. In my mind, well, and with COVID, we had to cut a lot of stuff, but in my mind, I feel like it's a little bit disingenuous to say that you've been totally ignored about all of this stuff in the Pell report.
The three things that you mentioned, we nibbled at them. We didn't really truly address them. We nibbled at the property tax. which did not cover the police raises in that given year, okay? The wastewater rate increase wasn't high enough to do what it needed to do. What we did, we nibbled at different things. But in 2022, it's just amazing how the Pell report explains the chickens are going to come to roost in 2022. And the way Ms. Leonti is going to explain to you on page 2 of the preliminary budget report, it's self-explanatory at that point if you look at the different line items. So with that, I would say watch what Ms. Leonti is going to do a presentation on. I'm not running the meeting. And then you could,
Yeah, sounds good to me. Yep.
Are you finished? Yeah, Beth, come on up. If you could give your name and address, please.
Beth Ann Rassica, 338 West Minor Street. I actually was also reviewing the report that Mr. Flynn was talking about. And one of the things that I had a question about was in terms of the property assessment. So I know that you made a comment that property taxes had been raised, but the report noted that it seemed like properties were very much underassessed in the borough. And I was just wondering, since the report came out, what had happened as a result of that.
okay, I can give you a brief over what I know.
Sure.
1985. Okay, 1985 was the last
I'll
time.
sit down. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're going to go to item number 4, discuss 2022 preliminary budget.
There we go. IT, ET. So we've been working on the budget now for a few months with all the department heads and a couple of meetings of council and the finance committee. Next week sometime, I have the borough manager, I have to present to council a budget. It does not have to be balanced at that point. I just got to give you a budget. You don't have to vote on it. It's there as a working document. And then we have to have a public hearing 45 days before the end of the year to adopt a preliminary budget or whenever you're ready to, but no less than 45 days prior to the end of the year. So with that being said, we've been, working to try to figure out, what revenue projections may be too low we could raise, what expenses we could reduce or cut. Barb and I sat with the 2 sewer plant managers today and chopped about $500,000 out of the sewer fund 2022 budget. They had a lot of things that were way over projected. We have identified one line item in the parking revenue side that we think we could increase a little bit, but we're not ready to jump in because the revenue numbers, we're not ready to say we're back to 2019, but we're hoping over the next 2-3 months with the college back in session, that parking revenues will go up, but we've got to keep an eye on that for right now. So that's where we are. We haven't discussed in a lot of detail the capital projects. There are a handful of projects that are ongoing from 2021 that They need to continue to be funded. But, after that, council's going to have to go through these different projects and see what you're willing to pay for, what you're not willing to pay for. And then the operating budget, we're still out of bounds, a little under $500,000. And you're going to need to, again, make some decisions on how, is where the budget is at today okay? Or do we need to reduce costs, services? And if we do, what are they going to be? So that's kind of, I know these are tough decisions that you all have to make, but the staff, we're going to need some help in order to eventually come up with a balanced budget. At some point, we're going to have to make some tough decisions.
So, Mr. Perone, thank you for that. One of the comments or questions I had is, do we have prioritization of some of those capital projects for 2022? Could we ask the department heads to sort of prioritize that list? Is it already in priority order? If we would be looking to you and the department heads, I think, to make recommendations around, what things we could put off. Right. Yeah. It's the tertiary filtration system. Yeah, so that's all on the report, right? But if we, okay, so those are the top priorities. I mean, if we just funded those things, $1 million, do the math there, but the second part of my question is the American Rescue Funds Act. Any of these capital projects fall under that?
Yeah, just about anything sewer could come from that money.
So the tertiary filtration system is $1 million. Yes.
And we don't have that money in our pockets yet. We got 1 million, we spent about half of it already, so we're expecting another $1 million. That's sometime next year, the end of next year, I believe it is, or 2004, or, no, we have to spend it by 24. I think the end of next year, we should be getting the second half of that.
If I'm looking at the capital projects, that's the big rock, right?
Yeah, that's something that has to be done. We're required by DEP to take the aluminums out of the water, the treated water back into Taylor Run, into the creek.
There we go. Sorry. What about the stream protection fee funds? Are there funds in there for that wouldn't take out of our
Well, they wouldn't, stream protection fee wouldn't go to the sewer fund.
You can't use it for sewer stuff?
Well, you wouldn't want to. You'd
You wouldn't
want to
want to.
use your sewer fund for sewer projects.
Gotcha.
Stream protection fee for stream protection projects.
Okay.
Or, we just, cleaning inlets that the public works guys have been doing for the last couple of days, preparing for this heavy rain this evening. They've been clearing those, the storm sewer inlets. That money, their salaries can come out of stream protection fee, those projects. And we take money back and forth from these different funds to fund the general fund as the year goes on, like street sweeping. So that service and the equipment can be used from stream protection fee money. So, we currently do all that.
I'm not sure I heard an answer to can we ask the department heads to prioritize their capital budget projects? Thank you.
Anything else? It's your show.
Page 2, please. So if we start on page 2, this is a summary review of general fund operating budget. As you can see on the left-hand side, the revenues for 2022 are projected to be $20,716,888. If we go over to the right-hand side, you'll see the expenses for 2022 are projected to be $21,164,030. This leaves the general fund out of balance by about $447,000. Looking at some of the revenues, there were increases that we are projecting in 2022. A lot of that has to do with the way that we're accounting for a lot of the items within the budget in 2022 versus 2021. For instance, have the state aid that comes in that goes out to pay the MMO. Last year, we accounted for that in the pension funds. This year, we're accounting for it in the general fund. So that's one part of the increase. We are projecting small increases within the EIT and LST based on trends that we're seeing in 2021 and the assumption that employees will earn more in 2022 versus 2021. We also have some sale of vehicles within the general fund revenue. That's for the enterprise contract, the old vehicles that will be sold, and then the new contracts for the new vehicles we are buying. And we also have a slight increase that Mr. Perone had touched upon from the transfer from the parking fund to the general fund. Last year, we had it at about 1.5, and this year we have it at about 1.7. Looking over to the expenses, while the revenues have increased, so have the expenses. Looking at the next to the last column, the percentage change, you will see the three biggest departments that have the largest increases. That's the recreation, the police, and the IT. Last year, when we did the budget, the recreation fund was its own separate fund. This year, we're allocating that to be part of the general fund. So the biggest drop in revenue there will be there's going to be no transfer from the general fund into the recreation fund. But with the recreation fund, the events that the fund is planning, they do not support the salary expense. So that salary will still need to be absorbed by the general fund. Looking at the police department, the biggest increases that we're seeing there are within the salaries, the MMO, and some software costs that are needed for this year. Police salaries are projected to be increasing by about $548,000. And looking at the IT department, everyone knows in this day and age, it's pretty important to have good advanced protection. So some of the expenses in some of those line items are projecting to be increased for 2022. I want to note that this out of balance in the general fund of $447,000 does not include any capital. So these projects that council would choose to fund would, essentially increase that
$447,000.
When you say it doesn't include any capital, you mean
No.
anything from page 3?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes. Are there any questions, or do you want me to go line by line?
I know this thing better than I know my last name, so it's up to the other 5 council members to ask the questions. Basically what Barbara's saying is we're $148,000 plus whatever capital we want to, projects we want to do, plus any new hires that we think we want to do. You add it all up, that's how far underwater we are.
I just want to note, though, for the capital projects, it would only be the items on the left-hand side under the general fund. The sewer and the parking and the stream protection funds are all in balance, so those aren't part of this equation.
So on top of if we, I don't know if we'll do everything on the general fund for the capital projects, but if we did, it'd be add another 710 to our
Correct.
shortfall. Okay.
Is there a need of members of council to go line by line?
Line by line for the capital projects? Is that what you're talking about?
We can go line by line through each department if you'd like.
But can
I mean, we had done that prior finance meeting.
So I don't think we need to do that.
Can I ask one more question? Mike, you said you and Ms. Leonardi met with the wastewater team, management team, and you found another $500,000. Is that reflected in these numbers or no?
So right now, if you look on page 2, you'll see that the wastewater fund, when this was put together, it was out of balance by $900,000. We've since made revisions to both revenue and expenses, and we believe we will be able to have that fund within balance. So at this point in time, it's the general fund.
Let's call it a work in progress.
Are there any questions among the people attending the meeting? Comments?
I have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
So with these, with the general fund numbers, does that include or not include the transfer from the parking fund?
It does include
It does
those
include that.
transfers.
Okay.
So, Mr. Porter, at this point, we would be having a motion and voting on it, correct?
No.
No. Okay, just a presentation.
You don't need to vote on any of this at this point in time. And next week, what we're looking for direction on how to either trim things, reduce things, or, does council want to do a sewer rate increase or property tax increase, or buy lottery tickets, or what should we do?
So when are we going to talk about that?
I have another question, I'm sorry. Sure. Ms. Leonardi. So, I mean, if we were to go through this line by line, and we will tonight, but, things like, I'm trying to think, on page 5, looking at the one from 8/17, I didn't get all the way through the one yesterday. But it is the Goodfellow ambulance funding, right? So the actual in 2019 was 88,109, 2020, 100, this year actual so far is 100,000 and we're budgeting 120,000 for next year. That $20,000 variance is based on the 2021 numbers?
No, the borough used to contribute to the ambulance fund, a voluntary contribution years ago. 19, I believe they came to the borough and asked for 85,000, based on our call volume in the borough. Their equipment and they were starting to change over from a volunteer organization to basically paid paramedics and technicians, I guess, whatever their job titles are. And they continue to move that way because it's hard to find volunteers. Last year, they came to us and asked for $100,000 as our share. Borough Council funded that. So about 2 months ago, they came and said, our share, based on our call volume population, is about 120,000. So we're not obligated to pay any of that. So that is an option. Now, you can reduce it, you can pay the whole thing, or pay nothing.
Next week, we have our committee meetings. I assume we're going to be talking about this again at that point. And at that point, would be deciding on whether it's my first time with a budget meeting, so bear with me. Would tonight be the night to talk about whether we were going to raise taxes or do a number of the things that you had suggested? Or would that be next week to committee?
I mean, this is a special meeting of council to talk about the budget, so anything's on the table.
Okay.
Can we have what are all the revenue sources specifically? I know the big ones, but like every revenue source we have that we could look at possibly expanding. And the ones that we could actually expand, not the ones that we can't. So in terms of real estate tax, EIT, is it real estate transfer fee? Is that one of them, right? What else? I know there's building permits, things like that, fees like that. I mean, I feel like what do we make, Barb, would you maybe answer this in terms of real estate, the real estate transfer fee? Is that a percentage? Is it a number? And then how much do we make off that? Do you happen to know, or?
It's a 1% fee. And that's based on, the sale. We get half and then the school district gets the other half.
Okay. I feel like the way the real estate market is right now, there could be a potential there to raise that. I don't know what we're allowed to raise it. There's a cap on that. Page 4.
About the fourth line down, see D transfer tax. We did keep that at the same amount as last year, just based on the conservative amount. It's a little less than what we budgeted in 2019, but again, that's one of those numbers, it's dependent upon what the sales are and everything, so.
I mean, knowing the real estate market now, the sales are out of this world. I feel like this is a place we could look at where we're not putting it on the backs of every single taxpayer, but on the people that are offering $100,000 more than a house is listed. So I feel like this is something we could at least do. So. If to just budget, just to assume that, or actually raise it, saying. We're just assuming, but I'm saying, could we still raise it and assume it'd be more? So, yeah, I don't know what the sales would be, but the way it's going, I feel like we missed a year of raising that. We should have been, so.
My question is, if we raise it on our side, do we have to share it with the school district?
Yes, that.
So if we raise it to 5, are we allowed to raise it 5%, and the school district gets, 2.5, and we get 2.5?
Well, yeah, these are just projections, so this
okay.
wouldn't be actually like increasing the actual percentage that we're collecting.
Right.
This would just be raising the projected revenue on our side. It wouldn't be actually,
Well,
changing the
you-
rate
you-
from 1%
You're
to
trying to
5%.
assume that we're going to be selling more properties and the number will go up.
Yeah, that would be the assumption.
That's dangerous.
I wonder what surrounding municipalities charge for that. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea if you would know that off the top of your head, Barb, but okay, so I'm asking a question that I really can't change. Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay.
There's a very unpopular option. Charging for trash and recycling pickup. Mr. Perone sent us all a spreadsheet on that a while back on what it cost us to do the trash and recycling pickup. And it basically breaks down to $221 per house. I guess that's for the year. So I think there's about 3,000 billable houses. So it's another fee that we could add in. It's not part of your property tax. We don't charge for pickup at all, so.
There we go. Coming from the second ward, I don't support that. My ward has a lot of homes that are, I have a lot of folks that are lower income in my area, and if we have the same flat rate per dwelling, but in my mind, that's just like extremely regressive, and I would rather see us go the property tax increase route. And what I said last year, I still stand by that. I would like to see a long-term, obviously we can't mandate what future councils do, but to set the trajectory of doing a modest tax increase every year or every other year where we can, and try to spread it out as much as we can. So instead of trying to go all in on one revenue source, I mean, it sounds like we're already up against the wall with our earned income tax because we're not distressed enough. But as much as we can like spread it around, I'd rather do a property tax increase than charge per dwelling.
At least you're leaning towards the right direction because it's an equal distribution of a collection. I don't know whether Ms. Liani did a projection on certain percentages of tax increase. Last year, we raised 6% tax increase, which netted us around $350,000. Looking at our standing deficit now, it would have to be higher than 6 and less than 15. So, plus if we add in the capital projects, as Ms. Dorsey said, we're closer to 1.5 million than we are 400,000. So you're my guess somewhere between 12 and 15% tax increase.
So I did put together a scenario here just to show the biggest increase that we're seeing right now within the 22 budget is obviously the police salaries. And I had mentioned that they're going up almost $550,000. So what I did here was I put together what the assessed value of all the parcels within the borough I multiplied that out by the current millage rate of 7.4, and we come up with a little bit of over 5.6 million. If we add in the police salaries of $548,000, we would need almost $6.2 million in real estate taxes to cover, this increase as well as the other shortfalls that we're seeing within the general fund. If you look down at the bottom here, that increasing the millage rate to 8.12 would bring in the actual amount would be a little over $1,100, so there would be about a $100 increase in the tax bills if it were to be increased by 9%, the millage rate.
Mr. Leonti,
They can see.
and that's just to cover the shortfalls we have now with no capital projects or
That's
no
correct, yes.
new hires, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
This
thank
is
you.
just for the operating budget in the general fund.
Thank you.
Hey, there we go. Quick question about, we're kind of back, I'm sorry, I'm backtracking a little, but on the bottom of page 6 of the preliminary budget, the last line item is the transfer to uniform.
Yes.
What's the story behind that one?
So this is part of some of the changes that I had mentioned that we're doing with accounting in 2022 versus 2021. Last year, we sort of assumed within the pension funds that the dividends and the employee contributions that the funds would earn interest on would help offset some of this, the transfer that would be needed. The transfer was 1.9 in 2021. It has since, well, it's actually increased to about $2 million. That's the MMO that we received from Mockenhop. So instead of accounting for that in the administration, we're actually putting it into the police department because that is their portion of the MMO that needs to be funded.
One of the biggest increases we're seeing, in terms of dollars instead of percentage, even though 101% is significant, is due to that pension change. So is it we were contributing $1 million before and now we're going to contribute $2 million, or we were contributing around $2 million before and now we're reworking how we're accounting for that?
No, we were actually always contributing the $2 million
Okay.
because you have what the general fund needs to fund, and we also get the state aid. So there's two pieces that go into funding that.
Okay.
So Nick, the Financial Advisory Committee has a subgroup that's been looking at the budget.
Mhm.
That was one of their big questions.
Sure.
We got a 100% increase. How's that happening? What's going on? So it took a few days for everyone, that committee, to understand where that money was coming from.
Sure.
There's a couple different buckets. The employees pay a percentage of their salaries into a pension fund. The stake is a state aid based on the number of employees you have. You get another bucket of money. And those dollars go to fund our pension obligation or minimum municipal obligations called the MMO. Then the borough has to make up the rest of the money. The Mockenhoff, our actuarial folks, this past week just sent us some information that police MMO is going up 200,000. The non-uniform pension plan was going down 100? 35,000, something like that. It was going down. So that's typically the trend. But at the end of the day, there's a slight increase, $100,000 or so more going towards the pension funds in general. What you're seeing at 101% is just doing it.
So it would be fair to say that $1 million of expense just got moved from admin to police because it's a police pension. And did part of the revenue from state aid also go down to the police
We actually,
revenues as well?
no, we kept all the state aid in the administration budget. We didn't, allocate that between the non-union and the police pension.
Okay, and then with the expenses, with that $1 million expense moving from admin to police, make sure I'm reading this right. So with this version of the budget, we're looking at a like $300,000 decrease in expenses in the admin line item overall.
Yes.
So another way to interpret that would be, just trying to understand, so it would be like, if you didn't move that $1 million of expense to the police, the variance would look like a $700,000 increase in the admin side if that accounting wasn't changed. We just add the $1 million of expense back into the admin side.
I think essentially that would be right without doing the math.
Okay, gotcha. And I'll dig in deeper and try to figure out where that comes from. But that's helpful. I was just a little confused about that number. Thanks.
It's well known I'm not a financial guru, but I guess it comes down to we're in a hole. How do we get out of the hole? What do we want to do to get out of the hole? No matter what we do, it's going to be painful for residents. Nobody likes to pay more in fees, taxes, or anything like that. I know I don't. But it's a really nice place to live. We've got a lot of good services here. It could be a lot worse. So if we have to raise taxes, if we have to do a trash fee, something like that, and I know, being Public Works Chair Committee, I'm real familiar with Public Works. These guys do a good job, and they care about what they do. I mean, if someone's trash hasn't been collected in 2 weeks, let's say, one of the trash guys will come to one of the neighbors and ask, these people still here? So, if we had an outside contractor, they'd go, yeah, big deal. It's one less trash can we have to empty. But something's got to give, and specifically where, I don't know. And if we're tasked with discussing that tonight as a direction, and I think we might want to hone in on a few of the directions we want to go in. Stop messing
Mr.
around.
Bryson, we know what our deficit is in the capital, in our operating money. We know we have to make up $448,000 somewhere. What we need to do is, since all the department heads are here, except for sewer, or wastewater, excuse me, looking at the capital projects, they've seen the screen. Heard what we asked them, Ms. Dorsey asked them what's the most important things that they wanted. So all we need is a calculator to add up what they absolutely have to have, plus the 400 some thousand, plus either part-time hires or no hires. And that'll give us the nut that we need to be at. So it's not hard to poll the different department heads, looking at the list of what they absolutely need to have for 2022.
I think writing's on the wall that a tax increase is highly likely at this point. I think what we need to decide is how much are we comfortable raising, and I think we also need to put it to department heads to come back with some cuts. They need to bring down some costs if they can. I don't think it's fair to just, this is what we want, let's just raise taxes. We have to kind of meet in the middle somewhere. So I don't know if we have a number in mind per department or something, but we have to come up with some kind of way of bringing that down a bit. And then I think it's inevitable that at least a property tax increase, I would feel more comfortable with that than I would a trash fee. But trash fee has to happen. I think it's worth it. I would never want to outsource that at all. So.
would also like to maybe look at some of the expenses where we're large increases. I mean, I see 150%, I see 900%. Those, I'm happy to just call those out if we can get an explanation, of those line items, to get a better understanding of why we are expecting a significant increase.
Sure.
I mean, the first one on page 4 I see is the banker fees, a 200% increase.
Yeah, so that's 40140. That has to do with the way that we process payments, both in the administration side, at Public Works, where any payments are collected. So while we did pass a 3% fee to charge back to customers for, using a credit card to pay in payment at the Borough Hall, we also have to pay certain fees, to have those machines and to run the checks through the remote deposit scanner. And those fees, they are expensive. It is one of our goals to try to, come up with a different solution for 2022. But, we're in process of that. It's kind of in the beginning stages, but right now, those are the fees that we are seeing.
So that's new. I mean, I know some of the technology is relatively new, but we just started doing like remote deposit capture and taking those payments?
No, we've had this for a few years now, and the cost associated with having those different ways of taking payments has continually increased. You'll see a very large number on the parking side as well. The parking is also, those fees are more expensive than what we're seeing in the general fund.
Any opportunity to shop our banking services around, get better fees?
I mean, I think there's always opportunity. I definitely think that this is one of those line items where there would be things out there that we could do different, or, different charges for these items.
Next one is on page 5, and it's 4382 expense. Again, it's not a lot of money, but it's a 900% increase.
So this comes from the fact that the Sustainability Department in 2021 was their own fund. We're now housing that within the administration budget. So that's why you're seeing such a large increase, because in 2021 we had 500 and we're going up to 5,000 in 2022. It's the EV expense.
Will Williams, Sustainability Director. We've been adding EVs, EV charging stations, and intend to add more EVs to the fleet. It's a really wise thing to do. EVs have a ton of cost savings for us, maintenance and fuel, especially certain departments that are idle heavy. But you lose some of those savings when you're building out infrastructure. We've also built out a little bit of public infrastructure as adoption has increased over time. But there is some revenue to offset that. Not sure where that's being booked, but we put in a 50-cent per hour fee December 2019, and that brings in a few hundred a month. So short answer is more infrastructure, more fees, but more savings and more fees generated from public use.
Next one I see is the next one is overtime expenses, but I think we can talk about that later. How about the civil service expense? That's an increase of 50%. Is that because of the number of officers we plan to bring on?
Yes, there was actually a carryover for that line item. It was budgeted at $10,000 in 2021, and the police department asked to carry over an additional $5,000 for that line item in 2022 for the whole hiring process.
software license fee, 77% increase?
That's also within the police department. That has to do with some software that they want to buy to house the body cam footage so that they can house that within the cloud versus having it on the little sticks and everything. I know I'm not saying the right word there, but sorry, what page are you on?
On page 9 and 48,600.
So within those line items, we assumed an 8% increase across the board for all departments. And that was a projection that it was basically based on what we received. We received information from our insurance our carriers that we can expect an increase in 2022 of about 8%. So you should see that across the board within all the departments that both the general liability and the workers' comp will be increasing in 2022.
Okay, same page, 45,754 and 45,766, 150%. The media USB expense and parts expense.
The one that's 150. Okay, there you go. Okay, these are the portable hard drives that we use in the organization for all the departments, and it does say 150%. And when you look at it, it's going from 2,000 to 5,000. So it's actually quite a small increase. In the IT budget across the board, you'll see some of these things that in 2019 and 2020, our budgets were slashed really badly, and we're trying to get some of these back to pre-COVID numbers. And that's why you see some of these increases. The next one, which is parts. Okay, that's parts. That's parts for every department. All hardware, all computer parts, phone parts, everything to support every department. And this is the number that it had been in 2019. And in 2020 and 2021, it went down to 10,000. So just think about this, $10,000 for every department, for every employee, for all parts. It's not sustainable. It's kind of a miracle that we're being able to do that right now. And part of that is because we had built a new network and had bought a lot of new equipment, and that kind of helped us through this COVID. So you see these big percentage numbers, and it's going 10,000 to 20,000. 20,000 is 2019 and prior. No problem.
Is it so on page advertising 4200, 100,000, and again, the dollar amounts aren't up. The 150% increase, is that similar to didn't do much?
Yeah,
And
the
I mean,
reason
I see
why
we-
that item was increased, that's based on the advertisings for any of the bid openings and all those other things, and placing those sorts of ads, they are very expensive.
So when I look at this, it's double what we had in 2019. Year to date for 2021, we're at 401. And, it's nominal amounts. But it is
I mean,
100.
that's certainly a line item. We can, take a review, take another look at that and see if there's any savings that we can reduce that down by.
there are, we could keep going. There's another one on that page for 900, and again, they're nominal amounts. Those are the ones that we should look at. I would concur with Mr. Stefano around looking for other opportunities. I mean, even something like increasing parking by 20 or 10 cents, what that impact has on the budget. 10, 15, 20 cents an hour? Yeah.
Where the other, when it goes to the next page and everything's,
Like above the first line item, budget list.
correct. So in 2021, those amounts there, they represent the revenue carryovers. It's been the administration's decision to not include that in the 22 budget. So I had the numbers there, I just didn't put, nomenclature on the other side for what that is.
What was the behind that?
So essentially, the revenue carryover is basically what you expect to end the year with. It's, your cash on hand. I think that that's an item that should be better classed, just keep it within the cash funds. And if we need to use that for anything, that should be a separate decision rather than saying it's revenue when it really isn't.
Is that reflected anywhere in this budget?
No, we have no line items for revenue carryover in this budget.
Okay, this might be helping a little bit of my cognitive dissonance then. Because I'm like, yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with how bleak things look. So last year we were operating under the assumption that we were going to carry over $646,000 in, I guess is that admin on page 4? And page 17 is another one of those for 1,000. On 20. There's another one for, I'm reading that right, 1.1
Yes.
million. So
That 1.1 is in the stream protection fund. And
Right.
we had a carryover in there for the Plum Run project that was not completed, as well as the John O'Green project that was not completed.
Okay. We can definitely talk about this like offline because I don't want to take like 1,000 years talking about it. But I mean, I'm still a little bit confused about. I'd be interested to know what the implications were of making those assumptions last year on the budget, and then what the implications would be this year if we continued that practice, and then like why we decided to change that. I've always struggled with the characters, though, so it's always been a little tough for me to wrap my head around sometimes. And then there were just a couple other smaller things I had about revenues as well. I kind of did the same thing you're doing. So for Public Works on page 10, it's the I'm sorry if this was addressed, but the dumpster revenues or dumpster fees revenue that being accounted for somewhere else now?
Yeah, we
Okay.
have that. It's on page 10, if, under 3.118. There's dumpster fee revenues. In 2022, we budgeted 1,000. 2021, it was $1,500.
I didn't, my eyes didn't track across correctly. I'm looking at a carryover again. Okay. Yeah, is that the carryover
Yes,
we assumed
yes,
last year?
yeah.
Okay. And then, is it reasonable to expect any grant revenue for Public Works this year?
To the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware, but there may be, so
Okay,
that could be a possible revision, but
Yeah.
also be aware with grants, the money comes in and then it goes right out in an expense, so.
sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything on our radar that's already in the budget that we could apply for a grant with in Public Works? Is there, it's in Sean's job description, right?
So I have two on my desk. One's for an updated flood hazard study for Goose Creek in conjunction with West Goshen Township. And another one sitting on my desk too, they're not due till October. I want to try to get some grant money to actually start the conversation on building a new public works facility, which is a $10 million project, at least.
So another thing I'm a little bit confused about is for the 2021 budget, we have all of these carryover like revenue line items in there. And that was was that our expected cash on hand at the beginning of 2021? That was kind of how we were thinking about that?
That would have essentially what we would have started 2021 with. That would basically pay for any of the expenses that related to the prior year.
Okay, so that's, so those, thank you. Those were not the numbers we were looking at when we when we applied for that loan for the first few months of expenses.
Those numbers were in there, but some of them, probably were a little inflated, hoping that, we would have had some better numbers at year end.
Okay, so the carryover projections for the 2021 budget that we made in 2020, those were inflated. And when
Well, not inflated, but they may not have been, 100% what it should have been.
Sure.
At that point in time, we were trying to project what we thought we would
Yeah.
end the year with. And as we know, sometimes, there's line items that they vary. So based
Sure.
on what the budget is versus what we expended.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Anything else, Nick? Any other comments from anyone? Oh,
I'm Tom McAvoy, 17 West Biddle, and a member of the Financial Advisory Committee. And first of all, I want to thank Borough Management. We've done a lot of work. I'm looking at the budget too, and harassing Barb, and they've been giving us great support. So I want to make that comment. Also, the debate going on up here, I really appreciate looking at every possible way to minimize whatever kind of tax increase we're going to get. The one question I have is one of the big buckets is the parking revenue. It's still, dramatically different than 2019. And I know we talked about, looking at the revenue over the next couple of months to see if if it continues to spike up. When do we need to make a decision on what the number will be from parking to put into the budget? Because I would think if you need to make the decision at the end of this month, looking at what's going to happen in the next couple of months is almost a moot point. Where do we stand with that?
Yeah, Tom, good question. The final budget doesn't get approved till probably November, maybe December meeting. So we have some time
Okay.
to hang in. In the meantime, we can come up with scenarios of what, what additional revenues would look like tax-wise or fee-wise and things like that. I agree when Nicole sent us the email the other day about that line item. I just was in Barb's office probably 15 minutes before that saying, I think we could probably jack this up a little bit, but Sean, who's been running the parking department, he's been following the numbers, a little closer than anything I've seen before.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the parking numbers. And it probably makes sense. I mean, I can see it definitely going up. How much is the $1 million question?
Right.
But I think we should base it on facts of what happens over the next 5 to 60 days.
Okay, and we have the time though.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Chief Moorhead.
Good evening, Jim Moorhead, Chief of Police. Just wanted to point out just a couple things because I know this is a borough-wide problem, but if Billy could go to page 21. Just keep in mind that this is a borough issue, not a police issue. I have the sheet from 2020, millage sheet, that this is a borough issue. And this year, 3 times it's pointed out that it's a police issue. Now, granted, we are the elephant in the room. We are your largest expense. Understand that completely, and I'm willing to continue to work with Barb and Mike and Sean to get this resolved. But just a couple things that are, I think, need to be pointed out when you go to page 6. Barb is correct that the police salary increase is going to be somewhere in the $548,000 to $578,000 range, and I think we need to tighten those numbers up. But when you take a look at 3 line items in there, police overtime, 2019, we were at our ask for 2022 when business was normal. I think everyone would agree, especially with recent weeks, that we are back to normal. We need to get our staffing and our police officers back out doing all of those initiatives to keep this safety going in the right direction. 2020 and 2021 were exceptions where we modified that budget and decreased it significantly. So that's a $126,000 increase that we're asking for 2022. But again, let's remember that's bringing us back to pre-pandemic. One of the other ones is vacation buyback and retirement. That's $180,000 that we've never had in our personnel costs prior to 2022 upcoming budget. When you add that up, it's $306,000. So really, our personnel increase cost in reality is somewhere around the $279,000, let's call it $280,000 mark. Again, there's work to be done. We're willing to sit down. To Ms. Dorsey's point, I have prioritized capital items. So I have an area where I have a little wiggle. We have, to Mr. Flynn's point, we have a little personnel wiggle. But all of those things need to be discussed and come with some consequences. Other than that, our operating budget went up $12,000 2022. So we continue to tighten our belt. We continue to look at everything. We spent our entire day today turning it upside down again and looking at it. But again, looking forward to the work ahead. But I just wanted to try to clarify a couple numbers that were sticking in my mind.
Thanks, Chief. Does anyone have any questions of the chief?
I don't have any questions. I know, Bernie, when you read the Pell report, they mentioned that are, the police is our biggest expense. But I also do remember the woman that presented it to us saying how, that how much that adds to our community. And I think that goes without saying anyway. So I understand what you're saying, and, you are appreciated, and I appreciate you pointing those things out and how much you guys sacrificed over the couple of years and tighten your belts to get us back into normal and now again. So I hear you. Thank you.
To your point, Mr. Stefano, I've said more than one time, good policing costs a lot of money. And if you look through the state of Pennsylvania, you'll find that the Borough Police Department is one of the finest in the state. They do an excellent job of de-escalation with 19,000 temporary residents that we get in your ward and Mr. Allen's ward every year. You don't read about us in the paper, thank God, because they understand de-escalation. And as my wife always says, you get what you pay for. I just bought a pair of those ear pods that you young people wear. I paid $20 for it. It didn't work. So now I got to pay $99 that I didn't want to pay for. So, but the reality of the whole thing is it costs a lot of money. And I think the residents of the borough would understand that. The $500,000 is a real number. And everything else is in the line items, but it's still a real cost that we have to do, and justifiable because good policing costs money. Thank you.
Nick?
I want to add another sentence to your little quote there and say bad policing costs even more money. But yeah. One thing that I feel like Chief brought up and Bill Mann also brought up that I think is interesting, and Barb, I don't know how your accounting software works. Would it be possible to add a 2019 actual column to this?
There is one.
Am I just blind?
It's on the.
Really? Am I just that dense tonight? It's the first one. Thank you very much. Although, how hard would it be to do the percent increase decrease using the 2019 actual as a reference? Or would that be valuable or no?
Can certainly put that in there if you'd
That
like.
would be awesome. Thank you.
Ms. Leonti. Be kind, I forgot my hearing aids today. I did. I'm in a fog. But Stream Protection Fund, I see on page 3, 586,284. And I see on page 20, 606,284. There's a $100,000 difference there. Can you explain to me why that is?
I'm sorry, can you say those numbers again?
Look at page 3. The Stream Protection Fund, there's a number by it. SPF projects, 586,284.
They're the capital projects.
Yes, but when I look at the Stream Fund capital expenses listed as 606,284.
Yeah, and there was some additional things that were kind of put in there at the last minute, and I should have updated that number, but the majority of that has to do with a grant that you'll see above the Greenview Alley project. That's a carryover, so we're essentially, there's expenses that are associated with that, and I apologize, I should have updated that number, but that's stream protection, that's not affiliated with the general fund, and the fund is in balance, so I do apologize for that. It should be the 606,284, and I will make sure that that's correct, yes.
goddamn, thank you. SUR fund, parking fund, and SPF projects, they're all incorporated in the departmental budgets that follow.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. But the general fund projects, they're not anywhere.
No, not at this point in time because the fund is not in balance.
All right, so the 447, 142 allows us to cover our operating budget if we raise taxes. But that doesn't include all the capital projects are hanging out there, none of them.
That's correct, yes. None of those capital projects are included in that 447.
May I ask Mr. Perone, are there any here that we should strain to try and fund for 2022?
Well, let me first make sure you understand that we're only talking about general fund capital projects. Yes, okay. So things that we definitely need to do, things that we need to do. So I said, so if you, the green light go. Yes. Yep, and we've gotten a grant for $688,000.
Can we wait to see if, did we get the grant? So that's our match.
Correct.
So if we don't match it, we lose the grant.
Yes.
What is green light go? Is that?
It's all the traffic signals in the downtown going in Gay Street, out Market Street, out 202 to synchronize all the lights.
Okay, so that's the very top one. Is that the reason why that's up there?
No, not really, no. It just,
Okay.
just
I
started
wouldn't mind
on
if
the
it
G.
was, it would make sense.
And as I said
Are there,
earlier-
are there other,
Yeah, as I said earlier,
what?
as I said earlier, police vehicle upfitting, you need to fund that. Because if you lease vehicles, there's upfront fitting cost for a couple vehicles we have to pay for.
Okay. Tonight, if we approved this budget, everything's here, but we would have to approve a tax increase too, to make it balance. Am I right? Was the answer yes? I'm hard of hearing, really. All right. Can you speak into the mic?
Oh, sorry. My mic's, there we go, it's working. You have options. We can find additional revenue in the budget. It's already here. Increase the projections, which I think we can do a little bit. As the chief said, if we work on, refining the salary line items in the police budget, which are big numbers, if we can find savings in there, maybe we can save some money there. So that way we can reduce a potential tax increase and maybe afford to do some capital projects.
Tonight, are we to vote on the budget?
No,
Because that has to be a special hearing.
no. Next week, I have to present council with a budget. You don't vote on it. I just present it to you. Then in the next 2 months, we have to vote on a preliminary budget, and that needs to be balanced at that point. So we got 30, 45 days to figure out exactly what you want.
And you'll do that at the council meeting. And at that point, do we talk about these general fund projects?
Absolutely. We can talk about it now. I mean, we're all here, it's raining outside, we're not going outside, are we?
I have a question about one of them, Bill, if I could ask, about these. I have a question. Can I ask a couple? Is that okay? Y'all interrupting your time. I don't want to interrupt you. Can I ask I want to ask about these specifically, actually, the capital projects. Is that okay if I ask? I don't want to interrupt you if you're still going. I'm going to ask. Okay. Okay. I'm going to ask about some of these. Is that okay? If I ask about these? All right. Okay. So about some of these capital projects, and I didn't focus on them earlier because I was still focusing on the 400 and whatever thousand. So some of the really big ones I see are the streetlight node installation, and then it just says Marshall Square Park. So could we elaborate on what those two are? What they exactly are?
Sure. Lisa was just emailing me over the weekend about these. I mean, this is another project that, I don't know how many phone calls or emails you all get from residents about the streetlights not working. They haven't been working for a couple of years now. So we funded money in the 21 budget. We're purchasing equipment this year. And then we're planning on buying the rest of the equipment and paying for the installation next year. It's basically a software problem. The software and the technology on our light fixtures is kaput. Died a couple of years ago. So the lights are on most of the time. If we're wasting a lot of electricity, Will Williams is going crazy when that happens. And so in order to fix it, that's the capital expense that you're looking at. I think seriously you need to consider doing that. Because I don't get any phone calls. I know Public Works does, and I'm sure you do also.
And how about Marshall Square Park? It's a lot.
Sure, yes, I can. Yes.
To follow up with Mr. Stefano, the number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 add up roughly to about $86,000. Can we use the American Rescue Fund money because it's infrastructure and also police protection? Use the American Rescue money for those items there. It has to do with the police and infrastructure, and I thought that would fall underneath that rescue money. But I don't know if it does.
The only caveat I would put towards that is money does have to be used for like broadband and putting on that sort of infrastructure. So I think we would have to do a little research to make sure that that would be a proper use of those funds.
Okay, all right, since you said the broadband, I don't even know what earphones do, earplugs do, but looking at the wording, it says cameras and technology and video. Those two items to me look like they're broadband or at least Wi-Fi or
Well, I think
or
with
something like that.
I think what the thought process behind that caveat in the fund usage was anything that you can expand that you had an issue with like COVID. So if you see some of these items at the bottom, like fixing some of the noise control within the Borough Council or putting money towards the hybrid meetings, because that's an issue that we faced through COVID. So you have to kind of relate it to, a COVID expense. But I can certainly do more research to make sure we could.
I was just looking, because when you said broadband, I just assumed the Wi-Fi cameras would fit under that. The AEDs, I would say they wouldn't, because they're pop your heart. But the video recorder and, like I said, the technology, uplifting the police vehicles, probably not. The 30,000 and the 11,000, the $41,000 we could save by using that American Rescue money if we're allowed to.
I have a question
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
the same topic, the rescue money. I have it, I'm on the Treasury website, and it says replace lost public sector revenue. Is there a reason we can't look at the difference in our parking budget and our parking actual and just call that lost public sector revenue? And just call that all replaced parking fund income, and then we can transfer that into the general fund?
Yeah, we talked about that before, and there's a percentage of it that you can, I think Barb knows that there's a calculation you have to use, but you can only go back to March 4th of this year, 2021. You can't go beyond that, behind that. That's how the bill was written. You can't reimburse your general fund for losses over the past 2 years. So you can only help it out since March 4th.
The pandemic recovery money cannot be used for the times you were hurt during the pandemic.
The idea of the money was to stimulate projects moving.
Government at work, you'll love to see it.
Does anyone else have any specific items they'd like clarification on or an opinion on?
Mr. Braceland, I'm sorry. This will be my last question. I promise I'll be quiet.
Go ahead.
I want to make sure I understand the carryover, right? So, the 646, the 545, 13.8, and then $800,000. And those have essentially been zeroed out, but they are actually in our general fund today, so to speak.
That would be the cash that you started the year
Yeah.
with, yes.
So it's essentially $1.5 million that we're saying is not there because we're starting with zero for 2022.
Yeah, what our thought process was is, in order to do the budget for 2022, we wanted to go by what revenues are actually coming in and then what expenses are going against that. So that's sort of a shift in thinking that we, incorporated into the 22 budget process.
If we didn't do that, and I assume we didn't do that last year or in previous years, I just wonder what that impact would be to the proposed tax increase. I know you can't answer that right now. I just think it's something we should think about when we're having that discussion with residents.
Ms. Dorsey, at the end of the year, when we do the carryover, the money that's left in the checking account at December 31st, let's just say it was $650,000. I think that's what it was last year. Am I right, Barb?
It's much less than that.
Oh, okay.
I think you're maybe going back that you transferred money out.
Okay. So anyway, whatever it is.
Probably about 300,000.
How much?
Probably about 300,000
Okay,
or so.
300,000. January, that's not enough money to pay salaries and insurances and stuff. So that's why we did that tax anticipation thing, because we don't get our property tax money until about March 15th. And then, then we do a catch-up for the entire year. And what we're hopefully doing with the 2022 budget is that we have enough money left over in December that we don't have to do a tax anticipation again in 2023, which is, we spend roughly, I think, about $40,000 in interest when we borrow it. Am I right, Barb?
So almost 50,000.
$50,000. So we're borrowing our money and we're paying $50,000 to use our money because somebody's giving it to us. So it's a little shaky. So it's better to have money left over at the end of the year to carry over at least January, February, and maybe, March would be a plus. But that's the problem that we're having right now, that we had last year, is a carryover.
Yeah, just maybe to help you better understand that. The money we borrowed, that $2.5 million, is costing us about $50,000 to borrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one issue. So the way to eliminate that is, which we were doing 4 years ago, was we were making sure we had enough money to carry us over the first 3 months of the year. And that should be a target, for this council and all councils in the future. We're not there yet, because we're spending more than we're bringing in. So if you can get to a point where we're bringing in, a little bit more than we're spending, you put that money in your cash accounts, and then we can use the cash accounts to get us through the first 3 months. Then when the tax revenue comes in, we can reimburse those funds. It's like, being at home with your checkbook. Each week you get a paycheck. At the end of the week, you hope to have a couple bucks to make it to, like, payday maybe on Wednesday. It's the same philosophy, just a larger scale.
Mr. Scott.
The MMO, is that minimum municipal obligation?
Yes.
All right, so you've given us one for the borough employees at $614,000 plus.
There should be one in there for about $2 million.
What, one for the police MMO, 2007771.
Yeah. Yes, they are. So if you go to page 5 under the administration budget, you will see line item 4480, transfer to non-uniform. We have that at 306. Oh, sorry. 4480. If you scroll over to the right, you'll see that we have that at 364,244. That's the non-uniform plan. We also receive state aid. We've projected the state aid for 2022 to be about $800,000. So we are going to use a portion of the state aid for the non-uniform plan as well as the police pension plan. So we're taking a portion of that, and we also have the parking fund and the sewer fund that pay into the MMO for the non-uniform plan. Those 3 amounts total that $600,000. Can show you where the other numbers are coming as well.
All right. So they're spread out over those different departments, as it were.
Right.
And the same, the police, what about that?
So the police, if you look on page 6, you'll see that we have the transfer to the uniform at the bottom there, the $2 million. Which is there.
Got it. Thank you. And the justification for those is found in these memos, I guess it were, or... Okay, thank you very much.
So the next Finance Committee meeting, any thoughts about where you want to go there? As a result of this evening.
Well, per what Mr. Stefano, Mr. Allen, Ms. Dorsey want the department heads to look at the projects that on the capital project list that they could do without in 2022. And that'll give us a barometer of what that chunk of the number is going to include. Then we have to add that into the 400 and some thousand. And if we're going to hire 2 people in building and housing and 1 person in Parks and Recreation, that's an added on as well. My recommendation for the new hires would be part-timers, if we do anything at all, because of the cost savings, and see how it works out with part-timers. But we have to wait till the next meeting to see what the department heads want to eliminate, which will give us a more solid number.
Mr. Scott?
I didn't comprehend that, but let me say this about the projects. Those that are not going to be included in your budget, you'd have a statement of those, a list of them, even though they're not going to be in the budget. Be nice if there was a sentence next to each one of those, like Whoops Park, what is that as a project? No, I'm not asking for a paragraph.
Yep, we can do that.
I think it's a sharp way to do things. I have 2 other questions for, I guess, Mr. Perone. Brother Flynn here mentioned of the Biden money, the, whatever you call it, recovery money. Could we have an accounting for that? Just the 1-pager? Here's what we got, and here's what it's been spent for. That would be good to have, because I don't think we have knowledge of that. Or do we?
Sure, yeah, you've approved about 50% of it already.
Because as we approve things,
Right.
you tell us where they came from. But whatever we haven't approved out of that fund is still in that fund. Where is that money? It's in one of our bank accounts?
It's in my bank account.
Well, it would be nice to have an accounting of it. Likewise, the stream fund, we hired a guy who, for what, a year or 2 years, did nothing but work on the finances for the stream fund. And it'd be nice to have an accounting of that, like, or is that does that question show I don't understand something? That is, which I'm happy for you to say, but
I mean, you say an accounting of the fund, I mean, you have an audit done every year. We can give you a list of projects that have been done and what's been the cost of projects and so forth. but I'm not sure exactly what you're.
Stream revenue is 1,100,000. That's the money that citizens pay in. Okay, and, all right, so how much is left over of that money?
Well, probably less than what's in there because we borrowed money in the very beginning. We floated a bond to fund the first couple years of projects.
The stream money, if it's used for the operating expenses of the stream department, that's kosher, it's okay. None of that is, none of that would be considered tree money, or is our entire tree program paid for out of the stream protection fund?
No, you can plant trees, but you can't maintain trees. Stream protection fee money.
Okay, but what you can do, you got it in there.
Yes.
Nick, go ahead.
Really, really quick. For the carryover, the new policy, what I'm understanding, I'm not going to talk about this long. What I'm understanding is we had a general practice that we budgeted to have money carried over into the next year. Sometimes we don't meet that goal, and that's how we end up taking out a loan at the beginning of the year. Is that a good, quick summary of that? Okay, so understanding that, one thing I think could be interesting to talk about next week is, sounds like that wasn't a good policy and it makes sense why we're moving away from it, and I think it's a good idea. Would it be something that we could talk about next week is if it's possible to, instead of abruptly ending that practice, would there be a way to phase it out over the course of 2 years? And then we can,
Yeah, we're not ending it abruptly. If we were ending it abruptly, we'd be coming to you and saying, we need $2.5 million to start the year, raise taxes to cover that.
okay.
We haven't done that.
I just mean just with the budgeting practice, though, it's
I mean,
instead of actual, it seems,
it's philosophical. Do you want to bring in a little extra money each year
right,
and get to that goal of $2.5 million? We're nowhere close to that.
right.
Last year, we finished with $300,000 left over. That was that. So nothing happened abruptly. In fact, it happened very slowly.
Right. I'll just send you an email about it. I'll think about it a little bit more.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments, any of the department heads? If not, I think we can adjourn. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.